Hello friends, thank you for joining me today for my February wrap-up for 2026. I somehow managed to read a lot of books this month. I don't know exactly how that happened, but some of the books, like the first book I'm going to talk about, I read throughout January and even earlier and only finished in February. So there are a lot of books, a couple thick books, but I didn't necessarily start and finish them in February. I do have like a couple romances in there. I do often try to read a lot of kind of romance in February since it's not my typical genre and it's just a 'tis the season sort of thing. But I read a couple romances and a lot of just fantasy and a bunch of other stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I finished in February that I think I finished it on February 1st. So I read this throughout all of January and a little bit of December, and that was Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson. And this is the third book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen high fantasy series. And this continues the storyline from the first book, even though it's the third book. The second book kind of deviates and takes you to another continent, and this one brings you back, and it's focused on the threat of this religious empire that has a huge, terrifying army that is sweeping across the continent of Genabakis, and all of these different groups and factions have come together to combat this threat. And there is also a huge threat making big trouble amongst the gods that threatens all of life itself. And this was a 4.5 star. Hopefully you'll be able to see the covers. My window that I film in front of causes glare on shiny covers. But so this was a 4.5 star. So much happens in this book. You learn so many things about this world, about the important players in it, about the magic and the Warrens, and there are some really horrific things that go on, but even so, there's also some great humor. Steven Erikson can make me laugh even in a story with a lot of death and terror and pain. And I continue to thirst after Animander Rake, Son of Darkness. He's just the ultimate shadow daddy. There are lots of poignant inner monologues by different characters in this, and a big theme is actually motherhood and its cost, specifically with a character called the Mibe that was just, I don't know, really sad and compelling, I found. And I just thought that this was great. It was long, and I know that they mostly only get longer, but so far I'm enjoying my experience, you know, with this crazy cool world with badass characters. Monstrilio by Gerardo Sámano Córdova. This is about a woman named Magos whose son passes away, and she cuts him open and takes a part of his lung, which she then feeds, and it grows into a monster. And we follow Magos and a few other people across several years and see how they deal with grief and love and other things. This was a 2.5 star for me. This is primarily literary fiction, even though there are a couple horror adjacent scenes, and Monstrilio is not human. I don't know, I've seen this categorized on horror on Goodreads, and I don't necessarily think, I mean, grief horror, I guess, but I wouldn't really categorize this as horror personally. But so Monstrilio has urges to feed on living things, which causes some strife and struggles to accept him by some people. This is not generally the kind of book I gravitate towards, so I'm not surprised that I didn't love it. This was a book club pick. It's pretty character driven, and I did appreciate like that the inner thoughts of the characters were often not pretty. And I think that it's a brutally, you know, honest depiction of what inner thoughts are like, even if people don't necessarily act on them. The characters were frequently not particularly likable, which I've enjoyed in books before, but I don't know, in this it just didn't really work for me here. I just didn't really particularly like any of the main characters that much. I think that the writing style also it just felt too distant and lacking narration for my tastes. There's a lot of like streams like of short dialogue, like just blocks of dialogue with like nothing holding it up, which just isn't really my thing. It's very queer normative, which was enjoyable, and I liked that. And I did actually like the ending. And I was surprised, to feel some genuine sadness as I was reading, but I think that the book spread its focus, a little thin by spending time on things that wasn't what I was expecting based on the blurb. It was much less focused on a mother's grief and dealing with that loss than it was, I felt, focusing on like denial and avoidance of hard truths, which is, it's part of the grieving process, but it was spread across more characters than just Magos. So I don't know, it just wasn't really my cup of tea. It also wasn't bad, like even though I'm mostly kind of criticizing it, like it wasn't bad, but really wasn't my thing. But like I can see the literary fiction appeal. Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver, narrated by Samantha Brett Moore and Eric Nolan. And this is the second book in the Ruinous Love trilogy of interconnected dark romance standalones, and it follows the best friend and the brother of the two main characters from the first book, who are called Lark and Lachlan. And Lachlan is a contract killer. Lark is a singer-songwriter who also has some murdery tendencies of her own. And, long story short, the two of them have to get married so that they can both get what they want out of this deal. But they can't stand each other, but they have to get married. And this was a 4.5 star. Kind of shocking to me, actually. I enjoyed this more than the first book, which I still think the first book was fun and I liked it, but like when it came to the spicy scenes, the ones in this book were like genuinely hot to me, and there were only a few. Like this wasn't just riddled with like smut everywhere. But I actually genuinely enjoyed the sexy scenes, and at the end, that bonus chapter, it was beautiful, wonderful. We love it. I like both Lark and Lachlan. I kind of wish that he had showed off more of his contract killer side. Like he does a lot of the pining. He pines for Lark, and even though he's, gruff and muscly and, tattooed and stuff, he's actually, pretty sweet and doting and gentlemanly. I was definitely expecting kind of more grit and violence from him. And I liked the villain, wished that he had more like page time. But yeah, I had a good time with this, and I will be finishing off the trilogy. The narrators were great, loved the sexy rumbling Irish accent for Lachlan. Like, I don't know, very, very few notes. This was fun and sexy. The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. I did listen to this on audiobook, which was narrated by Laura Knight Keating, and this is a YA contemporary fantasy that takes place in our world where witches exist and their magic is nature focused and tied to the season that they were born in. And the main character, Clara, is an Everwitch, which is very rare, and she's able to harness the magic of all 4 seasons. But with the climate getting really messed up because of humans, the weather and the climate are just getting more dangerous and erratic, and only Clara has the power to potentially help balance out the volatility, but using her magic has had fatal consequences in the past. And this was a 3.5 star. This didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but I think it didn't really do enough for me. I do think that this is a good read for younger YA readers, maybe even middle grade readers who want to try YA. I think it'd be great for that audience. It's a simple story. It has a cute little romance. The magic is cool. And, the message about climate change is very important, but the magical school setting is disappointingly sparse. The climate change stuff is also just kind of very surface level, and I don't know, I just was kind of hoping that it would have been developed more. Yeah, I think a lot of my issues just come from a lack of world building here, and like grounding the story beyond just the main character and her struggles. We're very focused on her. I also think that the resolution at the end was very convenient and just doesn't really satisfyingly address the conflict that Clara had been fighting for the whole book in regards to the consequences of using her magic. I think the way that things turn out just kind of ignores it. So I don't know, I don't have any hard feelings towards this. I love the cover, but the writing skewed younger than I thought, so I'd easily recommend this to younger readers, but it wasn't anything spectacular. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This is about a man called Humbert who is attracted to underage girls and becomes obsessed with one girl in particular named Dolores, who he nicknames Lolita. And this came out originally in the 1950s. It's a classic cultural touchstone, and I gave it 4 stars. This was a tough read. The prose itself is not easy. It's very verbose and poetic, and I really had to concentrate to get the essence of what the narrator is actually saying. But most obviously, the premise of this book is really unpleasant. I was constantly making like faces, just shriveling up inside at the things that Humbert would think about Dolores, the way he would like try and like surreptitiously like get himself off while being around her. Like, it's really vile and disgusting. But it's couched in this really, like, you know, beautiful language that like just had me rolling my eyes and just being like, ew, shut up, ew, stop it. This is a child, so yeah. This was as bad as I thought it would be in terms of like subject matter. It's not a badly written book, it's just gross. It's not necessarily explicit either. Like, there's a lot of euphemisms and like implying things versus actually like seeing things happen on page. But it's gross. The main character is self-righteous and self-aware enough to try and like, you know, win you over, the reader, with his honesty, like, and that's kind of part of it. The middle part started to get a little repetitive and stale, but like annoyingly, it still like demanded my attention with the poetic prose. It was a captivating read, not a fun read. It's been on my TBR for quite a while. Like, I distinctly remember finding this copy at a used bookstore in Pike Place Market in Seattle years ago. So I'm glad that I have now read it, as it's a classic. But yeah, it's rough. I don't know how anyone can misinterpret the point of this book. Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. I did listen to the audiobook of this, narrated by Rong Fu. This is a YA sci fantasy inspired by Chinese history and mythology, and we're in a world where certain humans are able to pilot these giant mechs called chrysalises in boy-girl pairs to fight against invading aliens. But these battles most often end with the girl being sacrificed and killed in order to power the boy. And society is very misogynistic, and the main character, Zetian, winds up actually reversing that and somehow kills her male counterpart in their chrysalis. And she is hell-bent on taking down this system and stopping any more girls from being killed. And this was 4 stars. I love the idea of this world and the cool mechs that take the form of animals that can, animals from Chinese myth, that can then transform into stronger forms. It's really fun. There's magic, it's fast fast-paced, there's polyamory, just kind of a lot of cool things coming together that I personally had a lot of fun with, but it wasn't like perfect. The romantic relationships were kind of weak, and I found that like the feminist messages were kind of very clunkily delivered in a way that kind of takes you out of the story, like you know, you're reading these snippets of an indignant rant rather than these ideas like really being shown in the world and woven into the story. But it was still fun. The ending was epic, and I am curious about the stuff with the gods, but I don't know if or when I'm gonna continue the series. It is just a duology, but I just have so many other series that I'd rather continue before this one, and this is one that has been on my TBR for a long time. Probably should have read it earlier, but yeah. Angels Before Man by Rafael Nicolás. This is a queer retelling of the story of the fall of Lucifer from heaven and the romance that blossoms between him and the archangel Michael. And this was a really interesting read. I have to give this a 3 overall. So this is split into 2 parts, and in the first part, it starts at Lucifer's birth and chronicles thousands, millions of years living in heaven as a very modest and shy, you know, bashful, most beautiful of all the angels, and kind of looking for his purpose in life. Eventually, he meets Michael, and they have a very, you know, timid and innocent romance, falling for each other over the millennia. And while it was cute, it was very slice of life and slow, just really not my speed. And then the second part starts, and it gets very traumatic. Multiple scenes of body horror and the wrath of God, just like the eldritch horror of existence, and like those moments like captivated me. They really pulled me in, blew me away. But the actual formatting of this part, like the way the words are laid out, it started to get very lax on purpose. It was a stylistic choice. I get it. It got like stream of consciousness at times, and it was a little hard for me to get into, just a little too poetic for me. The end, you know, was epic. You know, I knew how it was destined to end. And so like it was a beautiful and tragic story, and I could really sense that this journey, you know, was very personal to the author. So like no disrespect intended whatsoever. The style and pace just wasn't what I particularly enjoy, even though it had scenes that were just like incredible in their agony and horror. And those will stick with me. And this is technically the first book of an interconnected series that can be read. You can just read this as a standalone, which is what I'm going to do. I don't think that the writing style is really for me, but this cover is so stunning. House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I listened to the graphic audio version, which has a large cast of narrators, and this is like the Barnes & Noble exclusive paperback cool edition. So this is the second book in her urban fantasy series, Crescent City. And this book has stuff related to a rebellion against the rulers of this world and following a trail of secrets and searching for missing persons, as well as having the various romantic relationship dynamics between the couples. And this was a 3-star. Long story short, I only am reluctantly continuing this series because I know that it has some crossover with her Court of Thorns and Roses series. I just wouldn't have been interested in continuing otherwise, so this was fine, full of the same stuff that I've come to expect and generally dislike about Maas's writing style. Like, I don't know, check out any of my Goodreads reviews of her books to kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about if you don't already know. But I think at this point I'm just in too deep to quit Sarah J. Maas now. She's so culturally relevant. like the very end was cool. And I'll continue on to the third book eventually, and that's that. I did just see the announcement for Court of Thorns and Roses books 6, is it 6? Yeah, books 6 and 7, they have dates. So, you know, I am looking forward to that series continuing. That series I have always intended to continue, but I'm only reluctantly continuing this because of the crossover. And the last thing I read in February, ending on a romantic high note, was Tusk Love by Thea Guanzon. This is a fantasy romance based off of a fictional book from the world of Critical Role, which is a group of popular voice actors who play Dungeons and Dragons. And this book is about a human girl named Guinevere who is attacked on the road by mercenaries and saved by a half-orc named Oscar. And he reluctantly agrees to escort her to her destination, and on the way, the two fall in love. So she is kind of spoiled and naive, but kind, not mean or anything. And he is, you know, gruff and a little jaded. I love them both. They're very cute. There's a thread of humor throughout the book, which just made it fun. It also had cozy fantasy vibes, even though there are a few action sequences. I thought that the spicy scenes were great. And like, I don't know, I actually thought that it would be more frequent spice than there was, based on how in the Critical Role campaign, how the characters talk about this book. But it wasn't like, yeah, it wasn't just smut everywhere, but I think it was a good amount of spice, and I gave this 4.5 stars. As someone who doesn't seek out many romance-focused books, this was very enjoyable, and this can be enjoyed by people who have not seen any Critical Role. It isn't connected to any of the campaign details or anything. If you just want a cozy, cute, short fantasy romance, then I'd highly recommend. And those are all of the things that I read in February. March is almost over, so it's not quite late enough for me to just go into filming my March wrap up, but I will be doing that when I can. And yeah, at the moment I am currently reading actually kind of another cozy romance, fantasy romance called Violet Thistlethwaite Is Not a Villain Anymore. And this came out last year. I'm only like, 40 pages into it or something, but I'm enjoying it so far. And then for audiobook, I just started The Silent Companions by like Lauren Purnell, something like that. And I think it's kind of like a gothic horror, a historical horror. So that should be fun, a little springtime horror. And yeah, I think this month for book club, I just recently finished reading The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, so you can look forward to hearing my review of that in my March wrap-up. And yeah, it was a lot of books in February. Again, I'm not really sure how I quite managed to cram so many books in, but I was just in a reading mood, I guess. And yeah, the weather's getting nice out, and that just generally lifts everything up. When the sun finally starts to come out, it's starting to get a little warmer, and I'm not sure if my microphone is sensitive enough to pick it up, but a neighbor started mowing their lawn, so I'm not sure if there's a low humming you're hearing. But yeah, me and my husband are, I think, going to do some yard work here once I finish wrapping up filming. So yeah, I hope that you are enjoying the season wherever you are. Hope that you guys had a good February month, and hope you have a good reading month in March, and I will see you next time. Bye!